Adriana Amai came from the humble town of Fortaleza, Brazil. Years before her birth, her father Saita moved to Brazil from Hokkaido, hoping to capitalize on Brazil's rich culture and beautiful landscapes to gain inspiration for his art. While sketching customers at a local jazz club, he was approached by a beautiful Brazilian woman whose long brown hair and swaying figure made his heart flutter. Her name was Belinda and happened to be the owner. She was fascinated with his art and initially wanted to hire Saita to design a new logo for her club. In the beginning, Saita was diligent on creating his best work yet to hopefully court Belinda. His high work ethic made it where Saita was in constant contact with Belinda. As the days went on, their business meetings became more casual, allowing more subtle intimacy to be put into play. Saita complimenting Belinda's lifestyle and her beauty any chance that he could. Belinda herself was curious about Saita and gave in. When he asked for a date, she accepted. They fell for each other quickly, and not long afterward to be married. In the years that follow, Saita and Belinda will give birth to a baby girl named Adriana Amai. Adriana showed signs of high intelligence early in her childhood. Being surrounded by her father's paintings and her mother's music, she grew and excelled in all forms of engagement. She was given high praise from her parents and teachers, which resulted in a never-ceasing drive to be the best, and an ego to match. The first incident occurred when Adriana tripped a boy who had beaten her in a foot race. The teacher scolded her and called home. Her mother, Belinda, was in shock, as Adriana had never shown this kind of behavior at home. Belinda then asked Saita to deal out a punishment to Adriana to hopefully correct her actions. Saita at the time was working at the local canning factory and would come home exhausted and tired. But when Saita was told of his daughter's actions, he initially brushed off the altercation as kids will be kids. Though not wanting to invoke the wrath of his wife, he said he will talk to her. That night, he went to his daughter's room with the intention of issuing a punishment of some sorts. However, when he entered his daughter's room and saw his daughter's face, any form of punishment felt too cruel. It was then when he sat down that he decided to instead perhaps inspire her to do better. He began to tell Adriana a story of a new fantastical world, one where a young girl just like herself would save and protect the people with the help of her quirky robot companion. Adriana was amazed and engrossed in her father's world. This continued on and grew as Belinda would become more strict and Saita becoming increasingly more absent, though Saita was still able to allocate some time for Adriana, engaging her with more and more details to what would become his newest manga called Adi Valente. It was when Adriana was attending middle school that a private school had scouted her due to her high performance. Though the opportunity was great, Adriana's family had none of the financial means to let her attend. That is until Saita, wanting his daughter to have the best opportunities, spoke to several publishers in the hopes that one would be able to publish his manuscripts. Only one publisher responded though. Though relatively small, they would agree to carry Adi Valente, the manga that Saita had created to cheer up his daughter years ago. This allowed Adriana to attend the school but had unexpected consequences. Her father, while having one of his manuscripts published was a dream, it created a workload that interfered with his work at the cannery, thus having him terminated after too many times of sleeping on the job. Saita treated this as a blessing in disguise, as he was able to work more on his manga that which Adriana loved deeply. The resulting termination had put the family on hard times, continuing all the way until Adriana was in her final semester. Her father, after working on his manga faithfully for years, requested higher royalties. The company responded with the decision to just cut the series, instead of allowing Saita to receive higher monetary allowances. This of course meant that Adriana was pulled from the academy. While attending, she was at the top of her class in all forms of academics. Belinda, seeing that her daughter performed exceptionally well, was able to then negotiate with the school to allow Adriana the opportunity to graduate, which they granted, but with a small time of absence from the school, her top rank was stolen from her and had left her feeling furious. During this time, Saita grew sour and bitter over the loss of his manga, which he had put thousands of hours into. His disdain manifested itself in the new manga he had decided to write, one that was dark and twisted. His story revolved around a woman who would stalk and kill her victims using nightmarish drones fitted with her previous victims' remains. Saita and Adriana's anguish synergized, as that same summer, Adriana would stalk the boy that took her spot at the top of the class. Her aptitude for gaining knowledge transferred shockingly well into learning about this boy. She was able to learn every detail of his life, from what his favorite food was, to where he lived. Malicious thoughts and ideas whirled inside her head, culminating to Adriana standing over the bed, staring down at the sleeping figure that is the boy she felt the need to be rid of. Before the deed can be done, logic seemed to take over, saying that this is not the time or place, and left. Though walking through the night, she felt something awaken inside of her. Sayata's new manga was never able to garner any real success, and he was promptly devastated, retreating in on himself, leaving only Belinda's income as their only source. Adriana then took it upon herself to seek ways to provide for her family. She then settled on creating a website dedicated to Brazilian manga, a niche that was untapped at the time. Her upbringing gave her the tools to bring forth a community of followers, and with it companies and sponsors to fund her project. Not wanting to write the manga herself, she was able to abuse her fanbase to write the manga for her, at no cost, while being able to maximize profits for herself. It wasn't long before an offer was made on the site, which she promptly accepted and never looked back. Instead, she was looking forward, as when she got home, she showed with pride the check she had received to her parents. Her mother was in disbelief and cried with joy. Her father felt differently. Feeling betrayed and ashamed, that next morning while his wife and daughter were still asleep soundly in their beds, he left, taking nothing and leaving behind his family and a stack of unpublished manuscripts titled The Skull Merchant. Adriana was left to clean up after her father's mess, taking it upon herself to help her mother financially, during which she began to self-study at the library, learning about the ins and outs of economics and investing, leading her to become one of the youngest self-made millionaires at only 18. Her story was spread across Brazil as she was portrayed as a genius, and do open many doors for her to march to continue. It wasn't long until she developed a cutthroat business model that allowed her to buy small companies, only to then replace the entire workforce with non-union workers and slashed unnecessary expenses. Her fortune grew as she would then sell each and every company for massive amounts of profit. Adriana's time was heavily taken up by her desire to amass more and more money, but she was always allowing herself to take a few breaks, most of which were just to reminisce of her father and the wonderful worlds he created. It wasn't until her mid-20s that she was met with resistance from a real estate firm. Two board members made an effort to block her acquisition of their firm, pointing out the fiery trail of anguish and devastation of every company that she had ever worked with. Livid, Adriana devoted her time to finding the people that stood against her. It took her some time to find out who the two board members were. In the time it took her to learn their identity, she devised vicious, retaliatory methods to use upon them. Her devious thoughts turned reality as she used a prototype drone to then track the board members, taking heavy inspiration from her father's manga, The Skull Merchant. Adriana cornered the two men, producing a twin-bladed weapon. She moved in. The two men begged for their lives as she plunged her blades deeply into each of them, her anger and frustration disappearing, giving way to a rush of dopamine and excitement. Feeling invigorated, she moved forward and was able to acquire the firm that she had initially wanted. Adriana's actions that night would lead her to adopting this method into all her future dealings, making more outrageous moves on bigger and bigger companies, wishing that she was met with resistance, hoping that they would run, and yearning for the ever-growing fortune that would be hers. It was then when she came across a fireworks company that had laughed at her did she strike once more. They were renowned for their survival tours. As it would happen, Adriana would believe this would be the perfect cover. Adriana would later lure the manager of the company to a decommissioned airship hangar, where her drones confronted him. Over the years, they were developed and refined into something horrendous. Bones and other human remains decorated each drone, the defining piece being a large skull mounted on the top of each one, being a different stage of decay, some still retaining the shocked expression of her victims that sealed their faces into anguish. The manager tried to flee, but Adriana tracked him every step of the way, located in her base. It wasn't until Adriana tried to direct the manager to a dead end when her drone was taken down. Her drone destroyed, anger swelled within her, and she charged to the last location. She reached the manager's location, finding him bloodied and bruised from the beating he received from her drones. The manager was reaching out to someone just beyond her lights. There will be no witnesses. She strode quickly to the manager, slamming her blades into his shambling form. No sound came out as the air was cut from him. He spasmed once or twice before he began to grow cold. The blood was flung forward as she tossed his body to the side. Crying sobs could be heard coming from the thicket of trees and bushes as her light turned to shine on a young girl. The young girl's eyes widened and she broke off into a run away from Adriana. Adriana then smiled and gave chase. Running through the forest, her eyes dilated as the adrenaline coursed through her body. The trees transformed and she was greeted by a black fog that engulfed her whole as she ran straight through.